To Holly Cheeseman and Mike France, who are the ranking members of Appropriations and Finance, to discuss our recommendations of how we should be shaping Connecticut with the federal dollars that we are receiving for COVID.
Essentially what we did is we looked at the funds that were coming in from the federal allocation under the American Rescue Plan. We looked at trying to minimize the long-term effects in the sense that not using one-time revenue for recurring expenses. We looked at targeting this for infrastructure, for one-time expenses that were impacted by the COVID pandemic and the businesses and facilities across the state that saw that impact. And that's where we differ, I think, with what the governor proposed. We certainly have a meeting tomorrow with the Secretary of OPM to have that conversation further. But we saw too much of paying for recurring expenses, which just creates a cliff in 2 years of making commitments to the people of Connecticut with money that doesn't exist in 2 years. And we don't think that's fair. And we also understand that there's significant infrastructure that needs to be invested in, and this one-time revenue is an opportunity to make investment in that infrastructure, both transportation infrastructure as well as physical infrastructure in the case of our buildings, facilities across the state that are in dire need in many cases of investment.
The governor created additional funding for Care for Kids. We've carried that out over 2 years. We realize that if you're going back to school, getting a degree, a new qualification, very often those are 2-year programs. So we should provide the funding for those 2 years and make those funds accessible not just for work, but for further education. With regard to our unemployment insurance trust fund, again, Connecticut has borrowed, I think, close to $800 billion so far. We propose putting $350 million of this federal money into that trust fund to, again, soften the blow to businesses who are the only ones who are going to be paying for this cost. We felt investment in our nonprofits was vital. So we've found additional funding for infrastructure upgrades, for domestic violence shelters, for investments in our municipalities. Everyone has seen the huge increase. In outdoor recreation. So we looked at additional funding for Parks and Rec. Our libraries and senior centers, again, are seeing, now that things are getting back to normal, new needs for technology, for making them safer in terms of HVAC upgrades, really providing the resources that the pandemic has brought into focus. When we look at some of the capital spending, the governor proposed spending, I think, $35 million for broadband infrastructure. The FCC has a broadband access program with $3.2 billion. If you were on unemployment, if you get SNAP or EBT, you're going to be receiving upwards of $100 a month for that broadband and internet access. We felt it made more sense to allow those federal dollars to fill the gap. This is important. We know the importance of broadband and internet access, and instead look for additional funding for our nursing homes, for infrastructure upgrades like HVAC. Because, again, we've seen the toll the pandemic has taken on those facilities, and we need to make them able to invest for the future.